The quiet hum of the dishwasher was the only sound filling the kitchen as Lena leaned against the countertop, sipping her wine. Her eyes flicked to the clock. 7:50, 6 p.m. Mark said they'd be back by 8. She had only met Jason once, in passing, but her husband had mentioned him often lately, almost too often. "He's just divorced," Mark had said a week ago. "A good guy. You'll like him." That line had lingered in her mind. Not you two will get along, but you'll like him. There was something deliberate in the way Mark spoke about his friend lately. As if he was setting something up, planting seeds. Lena wasn't sure if it was paranoia or boredom that made her notice. Maybe both. Their marriage hadn't collapsed. It had simply faded, like a photograph left too long in the sun. Familiarity, routine, predictable affection. Not unkindness, not infidelity. Just emptiness. When the front door opened, she straightened. Footsteps, voices, laughter. Jason's voice carried louder than Mark's, deep, confident. Lena adjusted the strap of her silk tank top, suddenly aware of how soft and thin the fabric was against her skin. They stepped in. Mark gave her a small nod, his usual greeting, distant but pleasant. Jason followed, setting a bottle of wine on the counter, eyes lingering on her for just a second too long. "You must be Lena," he said, flashing a smile. "Mark's been holding out on me." Lena offered a practiced smile in return, unsure whether to feel flattered or insulted. "I hope he only said good things." "Not nearly enough." Mark chuckled and moved toward the cabinet for glasses, seemingly unfazed. Lena studied his profile, relaxed, casual. This was normal, wasn't it? Friends meeting friends' spouses. And yet, something in the way Jason looked at her made her skin tighten. The three of them moved to the living room. Jason took the seat across from her, legs spread, confidence settling around him like a second skin. He spoke easily, his words flavored with a slight southern edge. He talked about his recent move, his split from his wife, how he and Mark had met at a conference years ago. Lena found herself watching his mouth more than listening.
She didn't know why.
Mark barely spoke. He listened, laughed occasionally, but his focus seemed elsewhere. At one point, Lena caught him glancing at her, then back at Jason. The air between them felt thick with something unnamed. She tried to shake it. Maybe it was just her imagination. She hadn't had male attention in months, not real attention. Maybe she was reading into nothing, inventing flirtation where there was none. But Jason noticed things. When she adjusted the hem of her skirt, his gaze dropped subtly. When she laughed at his joke, his eyes didn't leave her face. Not even for a second. By the second glass of wine, the dynamic had shifted. Lena felt it. Not overt, not spoken, but undeniable. Mark was still present, but increasingly peripheral. Jason had taken center stage, and she wasn't sure if her husband minded. "So," Jason said, tilting his head toward her, "you always let him pick your wine, or was that your choice?" She raised an eyebrow. "Are you criticizing my taste?" "Not at all," he said, grinning. "Just wondering if you ever pick what you really want." That made Mark laugh softly, an odd, quiet sound. Lena looked at him, but he didn't offer explanation. Only sipped his wine and looked at her like he was waiting for something. She didn't know what unnerved her more, Jason's interest or Mark's silence. Later, after Jason left and the house fell into stillness, Lena stood at the window, staring out into the street. Mark came up behind her, resting a hand gently on her hip. "He likes you," he said. His voice was calm, casual. Lena turned slowly. "And you're okay with that?" Mark's eyes didn't waver. "I introduced you." He left her with that, no elaboration, no explanation. Just the echo of something unspoken hanging in the room. She stood alone in the quiet, the weight of curiosity heavier than any guilt. And for the first time in a long while, Lena didn't feel invisible. The following Saturday, Lena set the wine glasses out before Mark even asked. She wore a soft, low-backed black dress, one she hadn't touched in over a year. Not too revealing, just enough to make her aware of her own skin. Mark said little as he moved around the kitchen, placing a charcuterie board on the table like they were hosting some harmless dinner party. He didn't comment on her dress.
He didn't need to.
Jason arrived exactly at 8. Lena opened the door this time. His eyes roamed her slowly, appreciatively, before he smiled. "Evening," he said, stepping inside, his voice just rough enough to brush against her nerves. They sat close this time, no couch across the room, no polite distance. Jason took the seat beside her. Mark chose the armchair across from them, wine in hand, his posture almost too relaxed. He looked like he was watching a show he'd already seen but couldn't wait to replay. Conversation drifted. Jason asked about her hobbies. Lena found herself laughing more easily, letting her legs cross toward him, her shoulder brushing his as she reached for her glass. Jason's thigh pressed lightly against hers. Neither of them moved. Mark said little. Jason poured more wine. "You always this quiet, Mark?" Mark raised a brow, smiling faintly. "Tonight's not about me." The room stilled for a moment. Lena felt her breath catch, but neither man flinched. Jason turned his attention back to her, and this time, there was no pretense. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, voice low. Lena glanced toward her husband, expecting what? A raised brow? A rebuke? But Mark merely swirled his wine, watching them with the same unreadable expression. Jason leaned closer. "You okay with this?" Lena's throat tightened. "With what?" He didn't answer. Instead, his fingers brushed her knee, slow, deliberate. She flinched, not away, but toward. Her heart pounded. She turned to Mark again. He gave the faintest nod, then sat back. It was permission. Jason kissed her. Not tentative, not asking. His mouth was firm, steady, and real. Her hand found his chest instinctively, anchoring herself. The couch seemed to shift under them. Lena heard her own breath quicken, felt her body respond as if this moment had been waiting behind every quiet night of her marriage. Jason's hand moved over her waist, bold, practiced. She was trembling, not from fear, but from the absence of it. Mark sat no more than 5 feet away, silent. Still. Watching. Lena broke the kiss, eyes wide. "Are we really doing this?" Jason didn't speak. Neither did Mark. So, she let it happen. The rest unraveled in fragments, fabric sliding, breath catching, the warm press of another man's body on hers. She focused on sensation, not faces. Jason's hands, his mouth, the contrast of heat and detachment. The couch beneath her, the flicker of the lamp, the whisper of breath between them. She didn't look at Mark. She didn't have to. His presence was a shadow, a weight she felt even with her eyes closed. There was no love in it, no tenderness. But there was something else, freedom, maybe. Or surrender. After, she sat upright, redressing quietly. Jason stood, fixing his collar, his face unreadable. He said nothing, simply gave her a small nod, then turned to Mark. "Thanks for the wine," he said, voice even. Mark gave a short nod. "Drive safe." The door clicked shut behind him. The silence stretched like wire. Lena didn't look at her husband. She was afraid of what she might see, or not see. Instead, she stared at her hands, still trembling slightly, as if the act had shocked her nerves into awakening. Finally, she spoke. "Why?" Mark set his glass down. "Because you needed it." Lena swallowed. The answer felt both hollow and devastating. "You watched. I wanted to see you feel something again." She stood slowly, wrapping her arms around herself. Her skin felt foreign now, as if it belonged to someone else. Someone braver. Or maybe just someone lonelier. She left the room without another word, footsteps soft against the hardwood. Behind her, Mark didn't move. The morning sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains, casting pale gold across the bedroom floor. Lena lay awake, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, the weight of silence pressing down like a second blanket. Mark was still asleep beside her, his breathing slow and even, as if nothing had changed. But something had. She slipped out of bed without waking him, her steps silent as she padded to the bathroom. In the mirror, she studied her reflection, the faint bruises of touch on her hips, the slight swell in her lips. Nothing overt, nothing that screamed what she'd done. But she could feel it. an invisible shift under her skin. She touched her collarbone lightly. It felt warmer somehow, as if carrying heat from someone else's hands. Downstairs, the kitchen felt the same as always. Clean counters, organized shelves, the faint scent of last night's wine. She started the coffee maker, the mechanical gurgle sounding louder than usual in the stillness. Mark appeared 10 minutes later, hair tousled, eyes unreadable. He didn't say good morning, just nodded and poured himself a cup. They sat across from each other in silence, the kitchen table suddenly a wall. Lena broke first. "So, what happens now?" Mark took a sip, then set his cup down gently. "I don't know. You planned it, didn't you?" He didn't deny it. "I wondered what you'd do." That answer twisted something deep in her. "So, I was what? A test." He looked up, finally meeting her gaze. "No. I just wanted to see you want something again." Lena exhaled, sharp and bitter. "And, did you?" His silence said everything. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "You didn't touch me. You didn't stop it. You just watched." Mark shrugged. "I wasn't needed." The words landed like a stone in her chest. He didn't mean them cruelly, but that only made it worse. There was no jealousy in him, no fire. Just a cool acceptance that unsettled her more than any fight ever could. She had expected guilt to come knocking, but it didn't. What came instead was confusion, an unsettling clarity. She hadn't cheated on Mark. She had simply stepped out of a role that had long stopped fitting. Jason hadn't reached out. She hadn't expected him to. Whatever that night had been, it wasn't about beginnings. It was a disruption, a momentary collapse of boundaries. But it had woken something in her. Over the next few days, Lena noticed small things. Mark kissed her on the cheek like he used to, but there was no warmth behind it. His eyes slid past her more often, as though unsure where she stood now. She watched him, too. Studied the man she once knew inside and out. Now, he felt distant, a stranger who had handed her to another man without flinching. She couldn't decide who that made her, a liberated woman or just a pawn in someone else's game. One night, while folding laundry in the dim hallway light, she found herself asking aloud, "Did you want to punish me?" Mark, passing by, paused. "No." "Then what did you want?" He hesitated. "I wanted to feel something, too." "And did you?" He didn't answer. That night, they didn't sleep in the same bed. Weeks passed. Routine returned like a persistent ghost. Dinners, work, the illusion of normalcy. But something between them remained fractured, not broken, but quietly rearranged. One evening, Lena stood at the window again, the same place where it had all begun. The street outside was empty. The sky was bruised with sunset. Mark came up behind her, but this time, he didn't touch her. Just stood beside her, close but not quite connected. "I think we stopped being married long before that night," she said quietly. "Maybe," he replied. "Maybe we just finally admitted it." She looked at him. There was no anger there, no grief. Just the tired truth of people who had drifted and only now noticed the space between them. "Do you regret it?" she asked. He paused. "No." "Do you?" Lena turned back to the window. A car passed, its headlights cutting a line of light across her face. "No," she said. "But I don't know what that says about me." He didn't respond. They stood in silence, two people sharing a room, a past, and something that no longer resembled love. And yet, for the first time in years, Lena didn't feel like she was fading. She felt like she was becoming.